So my name is Friedhelm Glauner. I've been in the TI orbit for 11 years now, coming to Torah study via Zoom when it went online in the pandemic, and studying with the rabbis here at TI. And today I'm going to teach you about theology of playing fetch. And I'll share. So can you see that?
Looks great.
Okay. So Theology of Playing Fetch, a thought experiment on omniscience, providence, free will, and fate, employing, among others, a panther, cages, a demon, and gorillas. So this is a picture of a panther in the Jardin des Plantes around 1900. And I'm going to start with a poem by Rilke, The Panther. In the Jardin des Plantes, Paris, by Rainer Maria Rilke, translation by Stanley Applebaum. His gaze against the sweeping of the bars has grown so weary it can hold no more. To him there seem to be 1,000 bars, and back behind those 1,000 bars, no world. The soft, the subtle step and sturdy pace that in the smallest of all circles turns, moves like a dance of strength around a core in which a mighty will is standing stunned. Only at times the pupil's curtain slides up soundlessly, an image enters then, goes through the tensioned stillness of the limbs, and in the heart ceases to be. In Hebrew and Yiddish, the word song and poem are the same. It's shir in Hebrew and lied in Yiddish. And to give you an impression of how this was intended to sound, I would like to read you the German version. I'll keep the English version on the screen so you can refer to it. Der Panther im Jardin des Plantes, Paris. Sein Blick ist vom Vorübergehen der Stäbe so müd geworden, dass nichts mehr hält. Ihm ist, als ob es 1.000 Stäbe gäbe und hinter 1.000 Stäben keine Welt. Der weiche Gang geschmeidig steiger Schritte, der sich im allerkleinsten Kreise dreht, ist wie ein Tanz von Kraft um eine Mitte, in der betäubt ein großer Wille steht. Nur manchmal schiebt der Vorhang der Pupille sich lautlos auf, dann geht ein Bild hinein, geht durch der Glieder angespannte Stille und hört im Herzen auf zu sein. I think that gives you a sense of the monotony that Panther experiences pacing up and down its cage. And the next poem I would like to read to you is by Reisel Schiklinski, Polish-Yiddish poet. And here we go. First, the English version. The gorillas turn gray. The gorillas turn gray in the cages, lazy, fat. They've been sitting for a long time, motionless in the corners, where they grew old. The iron bars between them and the world get tired and gray as well. One strong push could have knocked them down, these tired iron rods, and the gorillas could have gone out into liberty, returned to the jungle, where the gorillas sit gray, tired, motionless, in the corners of the cages with mirthless eyes. And here I have the Yiddish version, just to give you the nigun of how this was intended to sound. Greu werden die Gorillas. Greu werden die Gorillas in die Steigen, faul, fett, sitzen sie schön lang, unbeweglich in die Winkeln, wo sei seinen alt geworden. Und Miet und Greu werden euch die eiserne Kratten, was teilen sie ob von der Welt, ein starker Stoß wollt sie öfter umgeworfen. Die mietgewordene eiserne Stangen und die Gorillas wollten gekennt Arois auf der Frei, zurückgehen zum Dschungel, nur die Gorillas sitzen greu, miet, unbeweglich, in die Winkeln von die Steigen mit unmütigen Augen. So you might ask yourself why I'm bringing these poems, but what these animals in the poems exhibit is a sign of a condition called zoochosis, and stereotypic behaviors like pacing or shaking the head or apathy show how they suffer from being in captivity. And there's a strong correlation between intelligence and the development of zoochosis. The higher, if highly intelligent animals like parrots or elephants will develop these to cope with captivity and frustration and boredom. Then I have a citation by French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace, who wrote, "We may regard the present state of the universe as the effect of its past and the cause of its future. An intellect which at a certain moment would know all forces that set nature in motion and all position of all items of which nature is composed, if this intellect were also vast enough to submit these data to analysis, it would embrace in a single formula the movements of the greatest bodies of the universe and those of the tiniest atom. For such an intellect, nothing would be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, could be present before its eyes." This intellect being able to compute the future from a given state is called Laplace's demon. Now, what I'm aiming at is we have these animals suffering from monotony. Now, how monotonous would it be for the creator to know everything in advance? So everything is fixed from the beginning. Omniscience would limit this vast mind to boredom beyond imagination. Now, what we know from Talmud, there is a beautiful rendition of God's daily schedule. And in the Babylonian Talmud, Avodah Zarah, it says, Rav says, there are 12 hours in the day. During the first 3, the Holy One, blessed be He, sits and engages in Torah study. During the second 3 hours, he sits and judges the entire world. Once he sees that the world has rendered itself liable to destruction, he arises from the throne of judgment and sits on the throne of mercy, and the world is not destroyed. During the third set of 3 hours, the Holy One, blessed be he, sits and sustains the entire world, from the horns of wild oxen to the eggs of lice. During the fourth 3 hours, he sits and plays with the Leviathan, as it is stated, there is Leviathan whom you have formed to play with. So God spends time engaging with creation, doing in principle playing fetch with Leviathan. So that's where the title of this session comes from. And this is something I think intelligent beings do not only suffer from being forced into a kind of captivity, be it intellectual or physical, but they also play. And this made me think, what would be a way for God to avoid this immense boredom of knowing everything in advance and only being having to fulfill a certain program fixed by this omniscience of what will be. And in contrast to Laplace's demon, who would at least have the pleasure of doing the calculations, God would only have to follow a certain plan, and so would creation have to follow a certain plan. Now, let's imagine a learning God of potentiality, whose omniscience has an important limitation. While God's knowledge of the past is absolutely comprehensive, God's knowledge of the future encompasses everything that could possibly happen, but not what actually will happen. This would solve two problems. First, it would truly grant God's creation free will, since there is no predetermination limiting creation's development. And second, it would spare God from boredom. Just imagine that you would know the fate of every single atom from creation to the end of creation for millions of millennia. Now, I want you to think, if God does not know what is going to happen next, can you think of elements of surprise in Torah?
Do you mean where the reader is surprised, or the
No,
story?
where God seems to be surprised.
Oh.
How about the golden calf?
Yeah. For example, yes, that's a good example. I think sometimes it seems as if God has a communication problem, because there is a limit to imagine how small minds like humans react, and beings operating on a completely different time scale than God, what they feel is a long time for Moses to be away, and that I think often when God seems to be frustrated with humankind and gets really angry, should you be angry if things happen that you know would happen? So this is, I think, whenever God gets angry, humanity took a wrong turn and not into the direction wished by God. I have a few, yes?
I don't know if I would think of this so much as being surprised, although the anger comes before some of this, but when people argue with God and try to change God's mind about what to do next, those are examples of things not going the way God is expecting.
Yes, that I have later on an example. I do think a good example for this is Cain and Abel in Genesis, and I just read it. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to Adonai from the fruit of the soil, and Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of the firstlings of his flock. Adonai paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering God paid no heed. Cain was much distressed, and his face fell. And Adonai said to Cain, "Why are you distressed, and why is your face fallen? Surely if you do right, there is uplift, but if you do not do right, sin crouches at the door. Its urge is toward you, yet you can be its master." Cain said to his brother Abel, and when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. Adonai said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And he said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? What have you done? Hark, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." I think that's at the beginning of God's learning curve, how to deal with humans. These are humans 3 and 4. And what God talks to Cain and thinks, well, this must be clear not to give in to sin. But for Cain, he followed his impulses.
I don't know if you're if it's necessarily the case that God is surprised that even if there's a scolding or an objection or I don't know if I think of it in a parental way, there's not a clear example coming to my mind, but I can imagine a moment in parenting of a parent scolding or reacting to some, you left the plate of cookies on the table, and said don't don't take them. You're not really surprised when the kid takes it, but you might scold them anyway, and it's part of the training, the learning curve for the humans, not really necessarily, or in that case for the kids, well, maybe for the parent too, to not leave the cookies so accessible. But anyway, I don't think my thought is fully clear, but just that just because of God having a harsh or strong response or seemingly reactive doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't an all-knowingness, that it wasn't predictable, that it wasn't sort of part of God's design, that humans went awry. Just, I don't know if that, yeah.
Well, this is just a thought experiment to, if we do think of God as not omniscient, so do we find anything that could be read in that way? Okay, Barry, go ahead.
Yes, sorry for any extra noise. I'm in the car right now. But the way I've sort of rationalized this sort of the idea of God being all-knowing actually is sort of inspired by Alan Moore's graphic novel Watchmen. The character Dr. Manhattan does know what's going to happen past, present, and future. But the way he describes it is that he experiences everything at once. So people would ask him, like, if you knew why this thing was going to happen, why didn't you stop it from happening? And he says, well, it's because it is currently happening and it will always be happening. Sort of this like almost cyclical way of sort of experiencing time. I always thought as almost an explanation for why God might not intervene in things like the murder of Cain and whatnot.
Thank you, Barry. Adrienne wrote in the chat that God humiliates Cain in front of his brothers. That's a good question. Why is God so angry? I do think maybe God didn't have an idea of what humiliation is. These were the, as I said, humans 3 and 4. So if we have a God of potentiality, seeing all the possible developments in the future, God might concentrate on the most positive outcome and not take into account that humans tend to take the wrong turn and not decide to follow God's view. So in a way, it's like a human standing on a lawn and watching the ants in the grass. And the human sees the kitchen where the sugar is, but the ants are struggling down in the grass to find it. I hope that's an image you can work with. Then there is the spies in Numbers. Send agents to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people. Send one participant from each of their ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them. That's a good question, Susan. After the flood, why was it necessary to let oh, I'm sorry. Yes, this is something an omniscient God would have known in advance. And why leave someone over like Noah just to have Babel? That's, yeah. Okay, I'll go on. At the end of 40 days, they returned from scouting the land. They went straight to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran, and they made their report to them and to the whole community as they showed them the fruit of the land. This is what they told him. We came to the land you sent us to. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who inhabit the country are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakites there. Amalekites dwell in the Negev regions. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites inhabit the hill country, and Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. Caleb hushed the people before Moses and said, "Let us by all means go up, and we shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it." But the other men who had gone up with him said, "We cannot attack that people, for it is stronger than we." Thus they spread calumnies among the Israelites about the land they had scouted, saying, "The country that we traversed and scouted is one that devours its settlers. All the people that we saw in it are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them." I think here we have this picture of the scouts seeing themselves as grasshoppers, whereas God saw them as a group. Now, if you take enough grasshoppers, you get a swarm of locusts, and that is a plague. And what I do think what God did not take into account is that they would see themselves more like individuals and not as a big group of maybe small individuals, but they did not add up their individual powers. And then we have Jonah's reaction. Jonah the word of God came to Jonah, son of Amittai. "Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness has come before me." Jonah, however, started out to flee to Tarshish from God's service. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went aboard to sail with the others to Tarshish, away from God's service. Now, I think this is a new reaction prophet shows. We have reluctance with Jeremiah or Moses, and God adapts the way he addresses Jonah in Jonah 3:1-3. The word of God came to Jonah a second time. "Go at once to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to it what I tell you." Jonah went at once to Nineveh in accordance with God's command. Now I would like to address how would God interact with creation. And here comes the still small voice and the divine lure in process theology's divine lure. And in Kings, God addresses Elijah. "Come out," he called, "and stand on the mountain before God." And lo, God passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by God's power. But God was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire. But God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. If we do this thought experiment and think, if we there's the concept of Tzimtzum, how God made space for the creation to take place. And we could also imagine that God leaves space for this creation in the way God interacts with humans or nature. And while there could be still God's influence on the physical world, God refrains from making people do what God intends them to do, but speaks to them softly, like asking. This is to direct, to nudge them into a certain direction, not to push, but to slightly. If you like, if you decide to, oh, there's something in the chat. Adrienne will come to Pharaoh in a second. Process theology process theology has the concept of divine lure, and that's God invites creation to go into a certain direction, or persuasion and guidance, but not coercion. Now let's go to Pharaoh's stiffened heart and the free will. But Adonai stiffened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not heed them, just as Adonai had told Moses. That on many occasions during the story leading up to Exodus. Now, we have to think who this Pharaoh was. He was the Pharaoh who enslaved the Israelites, who killed their male children. How soft was his heart to start with? So I think all it took to really make Pharaoh go back to his own nature was like asking him, "You really want to free the slaves? What will the neighbor think? Will you give up the power you have? They will think you'll be weak. You are reigning over a country of serfs. They will rise up if you let them go." So that was not so much an effort to stiffen Pharaoh's heart. And the decision not to soften Pharaoh's heart was Pharaoh's. Adrienne, does that answer your question? Well, it's manipulation. So, yes. But it's not coercion. I don't think that was needed in this case. Then I bring up Deuteronomy, wrong and right turns, bearing the consequences. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments of your God, Adonai, that I enjoin upon you this day, and curse if you do not obey the commandments of your God, Adonai, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day and follow other gods whom you have not experienced. Now, I've often heard that this is seen as a threat of upcoming punishment, but it could also be a warning of consequences our behavior will have. And if we look at humans, not heeding warnings led to the fall of Troy, because the Trojans were warned not to get the wooden horse into the town, but they nevertheless did. And or look at climate change. This was first a subject in the 70s, and instead of reducing our carbon output, cars got bigger and bigger and more and more. And I think humans have a talent not to heed warnings. Now a question, the final question. Is there room for basharedness, for things that seem to be meant to be? And yes, I do think there is this space, because in a world without predestination, meant to be could be a desirable but highly improbable outcome, like that I am here with you. I don't know if that was a desirable outcome. And I've been pretty nervous with this teaching, but I wouldn't have thought of leading a session on Tikkun Zoom Shavuot 5 years ago, that I would do that one day. And but it happened nevertheless. Or finding TI in a long list of synagogues streaming their services when I was first looking for online services 11 years ago. Yeah, Danny, if you really make it to the sugar against all odds, then this is meant to be. Taking all the right turns, or maybe not taking the right turns, but coming up at the right goal. So So now what do you think about non-omniscient, non-predetermining God? Go ahead, Carla.
Hey, Friedhelm. So glad I could be awake to hear your presentation. I think it's almost a relief to imagine God as not omniscient, because it takes away the question of why did God let this cruelty happen or create this horrible situation in the world?
On the other hand, it puts the responsibility to us. And I think that's where it belongs, not blaming God for what's going on here in our collective lives. Danny, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'll echo what Carla just said. Carla, right? Yeah. And it reminds me a bit of in thinking about free will and the kind of typical view of God as omniscient. There was a metaphor I heard once of it being more like a painter who sets out all the paints on a like, you know, on the platter that they put paints on. I don't know paint words. I'm not a painter, but they have all the colors there and the canvas before them, and they can have an image in their mind. But what actually happens when you start putting the paint on the canvas isn't necessarily what you have in your mind. I do quite like the sugar and ant metaphor, though, so that's easier to explain. But just you know, I think that there's room for knowing or having expectations beforehand, but then still leaving room for free will, and that's where, you know, going back to God being surprised, where that kind of starts to make a lot more sense. So.
I like to think of it like God having the perspective to see what would be the best. And if occasionally humans do not fail to get there, God smiles. A non-corporeal smile, though. Any more comments, questions, ideas? Yes. 2 years ago, I read poetry at 3 a.m. and I could have sung lullabies. There were only black boxes, and I didn't even know if anyone was there. This was so I thought I'd go for something more vivid than, and it definitely was. better than 2 years ago, where I'm still nervous, but maybe in the course of time doing this more often. Yeah, that was really strange, and I made pauses for people to comment, and there was silence. Oh, playing fetch is the Leviathan. Playing with the Leviathan. And for those of you playing fetch with their dogs, maybe they could see it as a special kind of imitatio Dei. In fact, I wanted to take a break this year, but there was a gap at 4 a.m. and that's how you got me. Yeah, that's the question. Would an omniscient God have the possibility for a change of mind? Because an omniscient God would have to know that in advance, that there would be changes of mind. So that, I think that's a conflict. Carla?
I was thinking of a change of mind that might have happened in the story of Ruth, where Ruth decides to go with Naomi and Orpah decides not to. But maybe God didn't know who would go with Naomi and who wouldn't until the very last minute. At a learning session I was at earlier, someone suggested that the reason that there was two of them was so that the reader would know that it was actually like consent, because consent is only real when like no is a possibility. So the fact that Orpah was allowed to leave without consequence was like proof that Ruth was actually able to make the choice yes.
I think what Daniel wrote, the fuzzy omniscience, that's a good way to put it. Because if you know all the possibilities, but not what really, you know the range of reactions that is possible, but you do not know which reaction will really come. So in a way, you know everything, but not how it turns out in the end. I hope this is somehow clear. To see all the, it's like a good chess player who has 50 moves in advance in his head, and playing with a beginner who doesn't even think about that and does really stupid things, thus causing trouble for the really good chess player. So okay, we are at 10:51. You will get your biopause. Thank you for staying up. And
thanks, Friedhelm. We will take just about an 8-minute break. So I'll play some music and we'll get ready for the next session. But take care until then.
Yes, I'll put that. Okay.
And you did say that you're in Germany, right? I wasn't just guessing incorrectly when I said that you were in Germany earlier.
Yeah, I'm in Germany. Yes, it's 10:52 here.
What part of Germany?
Southwestern Germany.
I haven't been, but I want to go. My family is from Bavaria, sort of near the Baden-Württemberg border with Bavaria, if I'm remembering correctly. My geography for Germany is not great, so.
I'm in Baden-Württemberg, southern Germany, southwestern Germany, near the French border, and someone requested my email.
That was actually me, yes.
Okay, I can't send you a private message, but so if anyone wants to contact me, you're welcome to do so. I think, Josh, that from the horns of wild oxen to the eggs of lice is from among the biggest creatures to the smallest creatures. I think in the land of Israel, wild oxen were the biggest animals around, and so the eggs of lice are minute. So God's sustenance encompasses all of creation, not just humans. Well, I wish I would have been less nervous. So. Okay. Then. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.